I'm going to be working with the following materials to sew this dress. The first thing I'm going to be needing is some tape measure just in case. I've gotten myself my pins, my small and big scissors. I've also gotten matching yellow thread to go with the fabrics, and I have a total of 8 buttons here. They're on the small side, about 1 centimeter wide. I have about 2 meters of this beautiful yellow print that has like the face of a lady, and I used 2 meters, but I suggest getting 2.5 just to be on the safe side. I have my pattern here, which I did in a previous video, as well as some interfacing for the collar of the dress. So once we have our patterns done, the first thing I want to draw to your attention is when you're cutting asymmetric fronts or backs, you want to mirror the panels. So if you're going to cut the right side of the pattern with the right side of the pattern facing up, you want to turn it the other way around for the other side of the front, because this fabric has a right and a wrong side. So you end up with a pair for the left and for the right hand side, and the pair has like right sides outwards and wrong sides inside. It doesn't really matter if both sides have the same symmetry, but just keep that in mind when you're cutting out your pieces. So I'm going ahead to cut out my sleeve like so, cutting around my sleeve head and down my side. You need to cut a total of 2 sleeves, 1 for each side of the dress, and this is what they should look like. So in here, I'm just going ahead to cut my notches, especially for my collar stand and my collar piece, because they're crucial notches that would ensure that I match up pieces together. So I'm cutting notches on my sleeve. I'm going to go ahead and cut the notch for my dress, especially around the waist and hip line, and along the extension that we did in the center front, which is going to be folded back in to make the stand where your button and your buttonholes would be. So once I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and take out all of the pins and lay down the panels here. So I have my front pieces in the front like so. Then I went ahead to fuse interfacing along the whole 11 centimeters of that front extension, because this is going to be the part where your buttons and your buttonholes will be, so you want it to be a bit more stiff. I have my back pieces, 2 of them like so. I have my collar and my collar stand, which I went ahead to fuse with interfacing, because you want them to stand properly when you are done with your dress, and if it's floppy, it doesn't really look really nice. So I also fused my collar piece as well, both of them on the wrong side of the fabric, and I make sure to fuse all of my interfacing on the wrong side of the material. Now this particular piece here is the panel that is going to be pleated back into the dress on that side, and on here I fused this particular piece that is going to be on the bottom front, and the other side is going to be on the bottom center back. So I just wanted to mention that. I also have my sleeve pieces here, which is a total of 2, 1 for each side of the dress. The first thing you need to do is to sew the dots, and I'm starting with my front. So I'm going to grab my pattern piece and just align it with the edge of my garment, and using a pin I'm going to puncture through the 4 holes or the 4 points that dots normally have, and then mark those holes I've punctured with a chalk. So by the time we have those 4 points marked on the wrong side of the material, we can pin the dots in place before going ahead to sew them. And I find doing this method is a whole lot easier rather than guessing where the dot is supposed to be. So just puncture through with the pin so it passes through the fabric as well. Lift up your pattern and then mark the holes or the points with a chalk. This chalk actually goes off once you put water on it, so it's not permanent. So now I'm just adding a few pins here like so, pinning the middle, the beginning and the end of the dot, and you just go ahead to sew from those points that we've already marked. So I went ahead to mark my other front dot and my back as well, because we have dots in the front and on the back of this dress, and I'm just going to sew this on my domestic machine using a normal straight stitch. I like to do a back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Some people like to, when they get to the end, they take the needle out and then they draw out a little bit of thread and tie a knot. So whichever method works for you is actually fine. And I just went in here to pin my shoulder, my side and my center backs. seams and just sew everything up so we have a full dress. But I wanted to draw your attention to the error that would happen if you don't cut the short sides together. So when you're cutting your dress, ensure that you cut the short front and the short back on the same side and the long front and the long back on the same side, else you're going to have a scenario where you have a short front and a long back, and that pleat detail would really work. So I just wanted to just make that clear so you guys will not be confused and wonder why it happened that way if you experience the same thing. So now I'm just going in to overlock my shoulder seams for the left, for the right, as well as my side seams. And I wanted to point out earlier on that when you're sewing your center back seam, you sew it up until 1 centimeter before the end, because that would give you room to attach your pleat panel. So this is what my dress looks like right now. I've stitched up all of my shoulder and my sides. I've pressed down my seams. I've overlocked all necessary points, and this particular open bottom here that is created from that short front and back is where the pleat panel is going to be. So thankfully, because we've already fused the center front for the top and the bottom of this dress, we're just going to go ahead and pin the pleat panel in place. So I've pinned the beginning and I'm pinning the end, and I'm going to pin the very middle and then pleat in the rest into place. So if you have a longer panel, you just repeat the same and then you go ahead to create your pleats. You can make your pleats smaller if you want, but I decided to work with a pleat that is 1 inch wide and is spaced by 1 inch. So 1 inch is about 2.5 centimeters, give or take. And I just repeated this all the way across until I got to the end. If you find that you get to the end and you don't have sort of enough material to continue your pleats, you can either start again or just have the end straight. But I did this by 1 pleat in, pin it down, separated by one inch, and then continue that all the way till I got to the very end of this particular pleat panel. So once we've pinned in all of our pleats, once you sew from the beginning to the end, you've automatically joined that pleat panel to that side of the dress. And because we left that 1 cm open on the center back, you have room to join up the pleat panel to the rest of the center back of the dress after sewing the pleat into this part of the dress like so. Now sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, I'm sewing my pleats into that side of the dress which cuts across from the front to the back until I get to the end. So at this particular point, I started from the front and I started on the back and I've ended on the front. So once that is done, I'm just going in to overlock my seam so it looks nice on the inside as well. So this is what the pleat insert looks like, and once that is done, you can go ahead to now close up the center back of the dress. So I'm just joining the center back seam like so, using a pin to hold all of my edges in place, and I'm going to go ahead and sew up that bottom point that is open on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch on my domestic machine. I use the Brother LS14 for anyone that is curious. It's a really nice, affordable, small machine that works for me. So once that is done, I'm just going to go ahead to overlock my entire center back seam so we just have the dress covered even on the center back. So I went ahead and I pressed down my seams. I pressed down my side seams, my shoulder seams, as well as my pleat seams, so everything is just nice and relaxed, and this is what it looks like. I love the detail and I love how it came out. It's a very simple design which I think came out really well because of the detail and the choice of the fabric. So this is what the other side looks like, the side with my beautiful mistake that somehow worked anyways, and the other side of the dress. So for the center front where your button is going to sit, you need to press it in half. So let me just show you what I've done at this point. So what I did was I pressed along the fold line. So remember when we made the pattern, there was a fold line, and I pressed the that panel like so, and then I'm going to fold in the edge on the inside by 1 centimeter and stitch it down. But I like to just pin this first before going ahead to sew, so I know everything is already pre-folded and can be stitched on easily. You can go ahead and give this a press so you know nothing moves when you are sewing these particular points down when you are sewing. And when you sew that point automatically like so, using a really nice edge stitch, sewing on the wrong side of the dress, you know you've made your placket where your button and or your buttonholes would sit on the front of the dress. This method can also be used for simple button down shirts, whether long sleeve or short sleeve, and it's just a really simple way to make that panel where buttons or buttonhole sits on the front of a dress. So this is what the front of the dress looks like right now. Just take your time sewing this particular panel, because if the stitch is not straight or if it's wonky, it will show. Now I don't really see a lot of mistakes because the thread is yellow and the material is very yellow, but if you're using contrasting thread, then any mistakes would show. So once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and work on my collar piece as well as my collar stand. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put right sides together of my collar piece, pin notched points together, and then sew all the way around on these points like so, up until the straight end, and turn it inside out. So now I'm just sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, turning at angled points like so until I get to the end of my collar piece. Once that is done, I'm going to cut my edges because we want the collar points to be nice and sharp. So I'm just trimming down these particular edges here, and I'm going to turn this inside out and give it a nice press to make sure that this collar is really nice, really flat, and we can then go ahead to attach the collar stand on the open end of this collar piece here. So after giving it a press, this is what it looks like. It's looking really good already, and I'm just going to grab my pair of collar stand and I'm going to take one side like so, align it with the center back notched point, align with the shoulder points, and then repeat the same with the other side. So what you end up doing is you end up sandwiching the main collar itself in the middle of this collar stand. So you want to ensure that the right sides of the collar stand is facing the right side of your collar, and then you just pin together the end, the middle, as well as notched points. So when you sew from the beginning like so you start from this edge, you sew all the way around, grabbing your collar in place, and you get to the other end, and what you end up having is you have the collar stand and the collar piece as one piece before attaching it to the neckline of your dress. So I'm just sewing here on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch, taking my time around curved seams so I don't have any weird gathering or puckering, and then I get to the end and do my back stitch to secure my seam before going in to trim or cut tiny sort of snips along the curved seam. And what this will do is it will help the collar stand to relax easier when you give it a nice press. So ensure also to trim the curved end of the collar stand, because that just takes away bulk that would otherwise have gathered at that point. So I'm just folding this over like so, turning it inside out, and I'm just going to take this to my iron and press it down flat so it's a one piece that looks like this. This is a very different color compared to the two-piece collar I did earlier on, because I wanted something with a little bit of drama compared to that simple design. So once the collar is done like this, you can go ahead and attach it to the neckline of your dress. And remember, because we already added that extension measurement to the collar stand should actually cover the top of the extension or the buttonhole stand that the dress has at the center front. So now I'm just going in to pin this side of the collar stand on the neckline like so, pinning together my center front, my shoulder points, as well as my center back point. I'm going to do this for the left and for the right hand side with only one side of the collar stand, because that gives you the opportunity to cover up this seam using the other side. So I'm just going to first of all sew this down on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and because you are sewing together two curved seams, like always, just take your time, ladies and gentlemen, because any error you make at this point would show, and you will have to either unpick or just sort of live with that gathering that would come out if you don't stretch both seams to fit each other. So I'm just going ahead to finish up this particular seam on this side of the front before going ahead to give it a press, and then fold it over in such a way that this other side that is on the front or the right side of the dress covers up that seam that we just created. So I always like to pin things down or press them down before sewing, because it just minimizes mistakes, it minimizes the occasion of having to unpick things, and just makes this whole process a whole lot easier. So once you've folded that over and you've pinned it down, we're going to be sewing on the right side of the material on a 0.2 centimeter edge stitch. And what this stitch will do is it's going to close up the collar stand on the right side of the fabric, cover up that seam we made earlier on, and it's going to finish up beautifully so that you don't have any raw edge showing even on the right side of the material. So with this seam, you just take your time, enjoy it, and go as slowly as you're comfortable with, because this seam is going to show on the outside of the dress. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to be sewing the sleeves, and I've taken the liberty to pin together sleeves on the side seam, and we're going to be sewing up the side seam of the left and then the right hand seam. Remember to turn at that point of the hem, because that would enable me to turn up that seam when it's time to finish the hem of the sleeve. So I'm sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance using a normal straight stitch, and after that I'm going to overlock the side seams of the sleeve. I'm going to repeat this for the left and for the right hand side. Give it a nice press before going ahead to pin the sleeves into the armhole of the dress. So I like to start with the side seams, match up those two side seams, match up the shoulder seam to the sleeve head, and then just sort of ease every other point into the sleeve like so. So once you've pinned everything in place, you can just take this particular sleeve to your machine and sew the sleeve into the armhole of the dress on a 1 centimeter seam allowance before going ahead to overlock, and you have that sleeve taken care of. So when it comes to sleeve, I find that they can be terrifying because there's usually a lot of easing and stretching into things. So just work with the speed that you are comfortable with. So once that is done, I'm just going in here to overlock this particular sleeve seam. I'm going to repeat this for the left and for the right hand side. Next up, I folded the hem by 2.5 centimeters after overlocking it. So this is the hem at the bottom of the dress, and I'm just sewing that hem up like so, folding it up on the way till it gets to the end, and this is what it looks like. So I went ahead to give it a press so everything is nice and relaxed, and it looks just as good on the inside and the outside. So here I folded my sleeve hem by 1 centimeter twice, and this I am going to be sewing on the inside. So on the outside of the sleeve, you have a nice sort of seam and a finished edge. So I'm just folding it like so, sewing it ever so slowly until I get to the end, and then I'm going to do a back stitch to finish off this particular hem. So the final thing you need to do is you need to mark your buttonholes, and you need to sew on your button. I already have a video dedicated to show how to make buttonholes using a domestic machine, and I've marked on 8 points because I have a total of 8 buttons. The buttons are spaced by 8 centimeters, and you usually would have the buttons on one side and the buttonholes on the other side. So this is what the finished dress looked like. It took me a few hours, over a few days to make, but I actually actually really like the outcome, and despite how the material is, which is in terms of thickness, I would really enjoy wearing this because it's a great layering piece that you could layer with like a polo neck underneath and some over the knee boots, and it just looks so cute. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video all the same. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, comment all of your thoughts, questions and suggestions down below, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye.